So, Manchester United have beaten Arsenal in a pre-season friendly by 2 goals to 0. And in today's video, I'm going to break down the game for both sides and show this as real validation for Ten Hag's improvement of his Manchester United side, but also at the same time provide the flip side and what he still has to do to improve his side further. I'm also going to give some notes in this regard for Arsenal and Mikel Arteta as well, but I think brings some much needed perspective to the meltdown we've seen on Arsenal social media, and bring some perspective on why things really aren't that bad. With all this to cover, let's start with the systems deployed by Mikel Arteta and Ten Hag. I would surmise the game as, for the first 30 minutes, Arteta's side had a lot of joy and success, but again, they were slowly drawn into chaos by Manchester United. Along with their two individual errors by Ramsdale and Gabriel, they were beaten by ultimately what United do best, disrupting games. But let's start with Arsenal. They built, as they normally do, a 4-3-3 going into a 3-2-5 in settled possession. United pressed them with initially quite an aggressive 4-4-1-1 shape, with Sancho as the front man, Bruno just behind him. But for the first 30 minutes, like I said, Arsenal played through this press with relative ease. Arteta's men actually had an overload on United in this press, specifically United's wide men in their mid-block of four, because Ten Hag wasn't promoting the fullbacks onto Arsenal's own fullbacks. And then if Arsenal beat this press, United retreated into a compact 4-2-3-1. And this could be the reason for the fullbacks not promoting in the first place. Ten Hag and United still very comfortable in retreating into this low block. So, something that isn't new, and we've seen, for example, in the FA Cup final from Manchester United last season against City. It's something they're very, very good at. And then with this low block, Ten Hag can focus on hitting Arsenal in the transition. But they did. It's a reductive way of looking at it, because they did try and build out from the back, and Ten Hag has improved them in this regard. For the most part, Arsenal actually man-marked their Manchester United's initial build-up from the back very well. Ten Hag's side tried to build up in either a 4-2-4, similar to Brighton's De Zerbi and what he tries to do, but I think the general theme, it was very fluid, that build-up, and as long as they had two defenders splitting the goalkeeper, Tom Heaton, and two defensive midfielders dropping just ahead of them and in between that defensive axis, numerically and in terms of specific players, it didn't really matter. Like I said, they're quite fluid. For example, Mount often dropped deeper into a pivot alongside Mainoo, but at times Martinez or Varane inverted from centre-back into midfield, with a full-back drifting more central to create almost a 3-3 shape in build-up. Still keeping the two wide defenders and the two DMs, Bruno was also capable of dropping deeper, and Shaw can also invert from fullback. So if Ten Hag's side ever found settled possession, they had 4 or 5 players already in the last line, and they sometimes even committed in forming a 3-1-6 shape, something we saw a lot in his time at Ajax, with Antony inverting into the right-hand-sided half space and Wan-Bissaka overlapping on the right-hand side. And I'll get on to all of this fluidity, how Ten Hag's side have improved in initial build-up, but also how they have to improve more. I'll get on to all of that later. Because for the most part, Arsenal's 4-4-2 press man-marked them. Eddie Nketiah and Kai Havertz were the front two. The wide men in that block of 4 inverted to block the balls to the wide centre-back or the full-back. Rice and Ødegaard were in that pivot. And this often forced Manchester United long and allowed, certainly early on in that first 25-30 minutes, for Arsenal really to dictate proceedings. United don't have that physical centre forward to play off and to go long. So instead, in transition, they had to work the ball wide before going over the top. Whether that was Shaw or Bruno Fernandes or Mainoo pulling wide to pump balls over the top and use then their straight line running power in behind, and to cause Arsenal a lot of problems. And this made the game very, very chaotic, and Arsenal could never regain it. Certainly after the first goal. But what could they have done to prevent this? Well, they didn't actually do too much wrong, certainly in the first instance. Both goals, like I said, were down to individual errors from Ramsdale and Gabriel. And as we discussed, first 30 minutes, majority of the actions, they were pretty dominant. But there were certain areas I thought that Arsenal lost control of the game themselves, irrespective of individual mistakes. And I will start with our setup in the defensive axis, and that was Saliba on the right of our back three, Gabriel as the central centre back, Tomiyasu on the left. Now, Tomiyasu, I thought, for that first half, had a pretty decent game, actually. I was very impressed with him. Timber was inverting from right back into midfield alongside Rice. But I think what I took away was, as good as Gabriel has been, he cannot lead our back three axis from the centre. I think Saliba is the only man in the squad who can do that, whether that's running back in transition towards goal or manipulating angles in the build-up. And this affects us much more than people ordinarily would think. And it ties into how much Mikel has been experimenting so far this pre-season. We were good at playing through the press early on, but once the game became chaotic, we lacked that Saliba presence in the centre to organise and to take control of the early build-up. In terms of organisation, that Sancho goal where Gabriel misses it, although we dropped off in the press, which is not unusual to see at all, you're not going to press aggressively for the whole time. We weren't set behind that, and a lot of that is Saliba's presence in organising the defence, and also how good he is under pressure. Gabriel, of course, it was his mistake, and he looked panicked in terms of trying to hash a clearance away. Gabriel is just much more suited to the left. I'm not necessarily criticising, but he's just not as flexible in William Saliba. Of course, this played into Manchester United's hands as well. I think Tomiyasu is probably the only one in terms of comparisons to Saliba who could create angles from the back and have that same bolt upright frame, powerful but elegant at the same time to drive into midfield. But it is surprising that Arsenal struggled with runners over the top and also runners from deep when we have the profiles, certainly in transition, such a powerful back 5-3-2 axis to deal with this. Aaron Wan-Bissaka actually often promoted without that big physical centre forward for Man United to be that focal point and run off the shoulders. But this is part of the reason why I don't think we should be too worried, because, like I say, we do have the players to deal with it. And United showed you could be punished out of nowhere. In these higher quality games against good opponents, control is the most important thing. And as you know, I'm a big caller for an internal or an external solution for our left eight, an all-phase midfielder to help drop deeper in the initial build-up, marshal space defensively, but also have that technical level to create angles in the final third, have that ball striking, box invade. And this is where Havertz in this left interior role comes into things. Again, since he's been linked, I've always said he's not a traditional number 8. And again, we saw him playing from left centre mid, but not as a left 8. He started as a left interior, but very, very advanced. And you're able to do this against sides where control of the ball is more guaranteed. But when United are such good disruptors and are able to make the game so chaotic, Havertz is not the type of player to get on the ball and drop deeper to get touches on the ball. He only had 27 across the 70 minutes that he played. I think that tells you, a lot of what type of a player he is. And Arteta does know this, but with Partey only just back, and on top of potential experimentation with midfield dynamics, Havertz played in this role, this left interior, very advanced role, like a left 10 yesterday. But he wasn't even that free Ramdoita type role that we saw against the MLS All-Stars. He pressed as a front two with Eddie Nketiah, had a very high set point, but was in this left interior channel the whole game. But in these advanced positions, like I've touched on in my Kai Havertz videos, whatever position he is given on the pitch, if it's in these advanced areas, this is where he is at his best, where all he has to think about is playing between the lines, creating space, arriving late in the box, which we saw in the second half, drifting and ghosting off the shoulder from Maguire in between Maguire and Dalot, and to be honest, should have done better with his header. But in terms of needing that all-phase left-hand sided or right-hand sided 8 to drop deeper against better sides. Havertz, of course, is a waste in that position, and I don't think we'll see him there as much progressing forward. I expect him now to stop occupying that channel, especially against harder sides this pre-season. And I do agree when people say Zinchenko inverting from left back into midfield will allow him to coexist there. But again, in physical and technical games, Zinchenko can't be inverted all the time and has to, at times, defend as part of a back four. And here you need someone to take over the mantle of the build-up responsibility. So what do? Rice, part of his incredible ceiling and purchase as a player is his ability to play in this left-hand sided 8 role, coexisting with Partey or Jorginho, or to take another perspective, if Arteta wants to play with 2 10s and a lone 6, the 10s need to be as press resistant as they come, able to drop deeper. And this is why Trossard has been much more successful in this role, and it's also why players like Mohamed Kudus, although they've played on the right wing and various positions in attacking midfield for Ajax, have been linked with Arsenal because they can be coached into making a number of passes in the first and second phases before roaming into the final thirds where they're very, very good. Havertz is just an offensive utility only. And to mention Trossard, again, a pretty good performance, I thought, a very good performance in the second half. His press resistance is exactly what we need in that role. Also, his ability to interchange out wide, as opposed to Havertz's more vertical axis, if he's not given that freer role. That makes actually a opposition press quite confused, but he still has to develop in this left 8 role, as I have mentioned in my previous videos. But let's go on to now where Manchester United can improve, and I think this is probably the most interesting point in the whole video. I want to start with how Erik Ten Hag has improved them in the build-up. I've touched on the shapes that they play in, the multiple structures with fluid rotations that confuses a press. Also, them playing out from the back with much more confidence. But still, they lack the central penetration, and going long shows that they can still improve their deeper build-up and having more time on the ball. And I'm happy that in my Mason Mount video, I predicted him dropping deeper in that left-hand sided 8 role. But just 19 touches in the first half yesterday against Arsenal, United as a team found it difficult to influence proceedings from deeper, and he certainly struggled in comparison to Mainoo, who played at the base of their midfield, but also is able to play as an 8. I've watched him sporadically before this season, but now going with that pre-season performance against Arsenal, on top of that, obviously Arsenal, such a well-coached and drilled side, he looks so talented. Casemiro will obviously play as that 6 going forward, but for United's attempts to take a more control-orientated based approach in tandem with their transitional skills, which is up there with the best on the planet, Mainoo could potentially be that second phase number 8 that they're crying out for. Someone able to play alongside Casemiro, who we must forget is 31. He's confident in making pass after pass against an aggressive press, waiting for gaps to open, and also having a very good range of passing himself. He's that springy and intense tackler that has been a profile many coaches have been after, actually. One Moises Caicedo, for example, who also prioritises retention over the range of passing that he also has. He's tactically fluid, and he's just 18 years old. But this isn't all United need to control games more. If you have a well-drilled press like Arsenal's, who often man-mark you, you need that ability to go long, and this often means the opposition press actually drops deeper as a result. And this is actually part of the reason why Bruno's first goal came about. It was still from a direct ball, and even though Ten Hag is fine with trying to make United in tandem with a more control-based approach, sort of the best transitional side around, that's his probably aim, to have these in balance, he will still want them to sort of do more with the ball and have it for longer periods of time, not to be as dependent on transition. and swing the probabilities back your way, which is what Pep has done and what Arteta has followed suit in at Arsenal. So going back to, going long and how that enables you to go over the top of an aggressive press, their links to Ramnus Højlund makes sense. Having that physical centre forward is very popular nowadays. The Erling Haalands, the Gakpo and Nunez's for Liverpool, potentially the Kai Havertz at 6'4" for Arsenal, allowing sides to retain the ball higher up, not just going direct ball after direct ball, flick on after flick on, but also playing over the press and the centre forward focusing on retention and getting settled possession much higher up instantly. And of course, they don't have this yet, so when they go long, it's much more direct actions instead of securing the ball. But this also will help them with a centre forward that's more physical in their channels of attack. That central penetration that we've talked about was being a bit lacking, to make them, as a side, Ten Hag's side, more sustainable. And they're part of a wave of clubs who are looking to do this. Liverpool, Newcastle, become more controlled dominant. And United, I'm not bashing them at all here because they are so close. Ten Hag is so close. Onana's introduction will help with this, becoming essentially a +1 in the build-up. And mix this, like I said, with their ability to disrupt. Their ceiling as a side is very high. I think their current game plan and project is still behind Arteta, but I'd love to hear what you United fans think about sort of the timescale on things for Ten Hag, because obviously this is just my opinion. But I think you should definitely trust Ten Hag as a top quality coach. We're talking about someone who is able to shift to mix that long term vision with pragmatism. He was able to coach Shaw into a left centre back role, coach Eriksen and Bruno to drop deeper into almost a 6 at times, make Dallo an inverted fullback. And I just think you need more time. And I think in a year or maybe 2 years, we could be looking at a Premier League, if Pep Guardiola stays at Man City, with 3 or 4 real world-class sides competing for it, which is a incredible bit of potential. And I want to finish how United could improve even more is to touch on their press. I said how their fullbacks are still slightly hesitant to push on. This press is much improved to last season, but of course they're still naturally inclined to drop into that lower 4-2-3-1 block when they're breached, and this discounts sort of the counter press as something that enables you to win the ball back quickly instead of controlling space when dropping back. And the good thing for United is there's nothing inherently wrong with this. They don't have to be perfect in the build-up or press because they have the direct weapons in Rashford, Garnacho, Bruno, whoever plays there. But of course, don't want to limit themselves time on the ball as much as they do at the moment. Also, going long from build-up is something Onana is great at. And if they want to keep overloading the last line of play with 4 or 5, sometimes even 6 men, building in a 4-2-4 or something, they do not need, or they're not as required to get that physical presence up top because they have the runners around to often keep a back four of the opposition occupied enough. But now I want to move on to finish with Arsenal and how nothing is wrong with Arsenal. They've got a massive season ahead where they're going to be gunning for the title once again. But having said this, as an Arsenal fan myself, I would like to see the end of Arteta's sort of experimentation phase now. We've seen him change the dynamics of the defensive axis and midfield. Also, who inverts left or right, which 8 drops deeper, and of course have players yet to return. Ultimately, it was 2 mistakes that really lost us the game yesterday, meaning we got done by what United do best. But let me know your thoughts, Arsenal fans. But I think it's just part of Mikel Arteta trying to make us as unpredictable a side as possible. And I think, for me, a real statement in this regard is going back to the Etihad and the 4-1 drubbing last season, with Pep suddenly all of a sudden changing his whole build-up structure completely, bamboozling us in the first half. And I think it's Arteta wanting to do a similar thing, make his side as unpredictable, as multifaceted as possible. So definitely don't fall out over a pre-season game. The quality and the foundations have been laid for this Arteta project. And I mean, if we sell players, we still may have more spending on the horizon. Alternatively, the left 8 solution may be something internal, and I think this is the last piece of the puzzle. So just let the team cohere. There's been there's been 3 marquee signings this summer. We are there as a side. We've shown that before, and as long as we're ready by the end of pre-season, that's all that matters. And the same goes for Manchester United. Having said that, players have now returned, and this should be the end of experimentation for Mikel Arteta. And now it's time to go into Barcelona, go into the rest of the games, give us that momentum going into the new season. As I finish, I want to get your thoughts as well. I wanted to do sort of more individual performance analysis here, but I don't think I really had time to fit it in the video. Like I said, I thought Tomiyasu was impressive. I thought KT was also pretty good coming on in the second half, but let me know your thoughts. Other than that, United look better. I've kind of as well underlined that with what they need to improve further. I don't think anything's too far wrong with Arsenal, but I would like to see us stop the experimentation now. We're still in a very good place going into the season. I'm very, very excited. And if you've enjoyed the video, comment, like, and subscribe. I only asked you to subscribe right at the end of the video because hopefully then you've really enjoyed the content. Hopefully it's been really informative for you. But like I said, that's all from me. I'll catch you in the next one. We've got so much to come up. I hope this video is out in good time. I'm recording in a hotel, so the Wi-Fi is very, very poor. But we've also got Pochettino and Chelsea to come up, the promoted teams to do, how Postecoglou has lined up Spurs in his first pre-season games, and much, much more. I've got loads of stuff to get on with. I'll catch you in the next one. See you in a bit.